Good Tuesday morning to you. Mr. Bagby here, ready to jump into today's work assignment and share some stories with you. Let's hop right on it. All righty. Tis Tuesday, day 26, Tuesday, September 29th, 2020. There's the key. I hope it's helping. And we will be starting What is a Myth? I'll be reading today on this video, pages 4 through 14, and we'll be reading it together. And I'll also be reading Mufara's Beautiful Daughters. And that will be in your module today, so you can actually look at it too, as well as listen to me share the story with you. Please choose what type you're creating, a fable, folktale, myth, or fairy tale. Don't forget, you've got your book reports now in your Canvas module from yesterday. You can submit it right there to that part of the module. That will not expire anytime soon, so feel free to submit that whenever you're ready to submit it. And then again, if you're writing, I'd like to hear from you and hear some of these stories on Friday. I really can't wait. I want to see your creativity in action. Please keep practicing your spelling words in dictionary.com for definitions and spellingtraining.com for spelling. The semicolon and the colon, another video today, and it's a really good one. And also you have questions to answer as to what is the correct sentence punctuation. Day number 2 in the amazing internet. So please check that out and correct all the mistakes that are in there. You guys are doing really well on your ancient Egypt PowerPoint presentations. I know some of you are really finished. Just make sure you read through it, and if you include a ton of text that you've copied and pasted and you read that to us, that part might be a little boring. So you might want to put a lot of text in your own words and make it sound like it came from you. That way you're making it more authentic, and you know, we don't really need to hear you reading encyclopedic or Wikipedia entries about ancient Egypt. I'd like you to read those and then come up with your own sentences. Please continue practicing world geography games. And don't forget to finish up that continents and oceans test. No enrichment there for gifted block because we are doing research on ancient Egypt. And I showed you yesterday these amazing mind games, and you'll get a different day of history today. If you click on this link, it'll be what happened in history on September 29th throughout the last, I forgot how far back they go. They go pretty far back. All right, let's go into what is a myth. There it is. The Britannica Library. What is a myth? Britannica Encyclopedia Company. In ancient times, myths were used to explain how the world came to be and how things worked. They were also used to teach lessons or values and to explain religious beliefs. Mythical stories gave information, but they were also fun. Listeners were captivated by tales of heroes defeating giants, winged creatures changing into humans, and beautiful women saving men that they loved, and vice versa. Parents told myths to their children, and they passed them on to their own children through many generations. Eventually, people started to write down the myths. A lot of ancient myths are really the predecessors, things that came before of our superheroes. Myths were used to explain things in the natural world, such as lightning. Today we read myths in books, and myth comes from the Greek word mythos, which means speech or something spoken. Generations means people born at around the same time. Like I was born in 61, and I have a generation of people that are from after World War II to around born 65. So there's different generations to this day of people. Why are myths told? Myths have a purpose. Some ask difficult questions such as, where are we from and what happens when we die? Some myths teach a lesson you can learn. Characters in myths deal with strong feelings such as fear and love. As myths have been told over time, they have changed. Today, there are different versions of the same myths. The marks on this rock are called runes. They are writings of the Norse people of Northern Europe who told myths, like of Thor, the god of thunder. Many places around the world, from North America to India and China, have similar myths. The stories are not exactly the same, but parts of them are alike. One of the reasons is because we're all human beings, and we have a lot of times very similar ways of thinking about the world and how things are and what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad. The ancient Greek poet Homer was a great storyteller. He wrote two mythical poems called the Iliad and the Odyssey. The Odyssey is what got me to fall in love with myths when I read that in 7th grade. Themes and myths. There are many different themes in myths. Creation myths explain how the world began. In some myths, people make difficult decisions as they try to do the right thing. In other myths, heroes fight battles, face incredible creatures, or try to win their sweetheart's love. Some heroes even take on the gods. Heroes often have awesome adventures. For example, a Greek myth tells of Perseus, who chopped off the head of a scary creature named Medusa. She of the hair made out of snakes, and if you look into her eyes, you turn to stone. In Indian mythology, the great god Brahma, the creator, was born from a lotus flower. The Roman poet Ovid told the tale of Perseus and Medusa. Medusa had live snakes for hair and could turn men to stone with just one look. Yowza. Myths retold. Now that we know what myths are and why they are told, let's read and compare some wonderful myths from around the world. Ymir, the frost giant. This myth is from Northern Europe. Go figure, where it's really cold. In the beginning, there was nothing. Then two places formed, Muspelheim and a world of fire, and Niflheim was a world of ice. Between the two worlds, ice melted and formed Ymir, the frost giant. Three Norse sky gods, Odin, Vili, and Ve, were the creator gods. They killed Ymir and used his body to make earth. They used his bones as mountains and his blood to create the oceans, lakes, and rivers. Ymir's skull became the sky. The gods threw bright sparks from Muspelheim into the sky to make the sun, moon, and stars. Finally, the gods created Ask, the first man, and the first woman, Embla. Norse people came from the cold northern European countries now known as Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. Compare means to look at two or more things to see how alike or different they are. Create means to make something. Raven. This myth was first told by Native Americans. Raven was a trickster and a shapeshifter. He hated the never-ending dark. To steal the light, Raven changed into the grandson of the Sky Chief. Raven persuaded the Sky Chief to let him play with the stars, which were hidden in a box. Raven threw the stars into the sky where they became stuck. Raven cried, so the Sky Chief gave him another box to keep him happy. This time Raven took out the moon. He bounced it until it reached the sky. The sun was in the third box. Raven changed back into a bird, and with the sun in his beak, he flew up into the sky, lighting up the world. That's some Raven. The Raven myth explains how the stars, moon, and the sun were created, and a shapeshifter is something that can change shape to become something else. I know that's in the Harry Potter books. Harry Potter, by the way, the author, really know mythology backwards and forwards, and they use it effectively, as well as C.S. Lewis, the writer of the Narnian Chronicles, and J.R.R. Tolkien, the writer of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. So they really study those, and they include those myths into their stories just in different forms, which is okay because that's what the myths always did. They changed as they were told. Let's compare. Both Ymir the Frost Giant and Raven are myths about the creation of the world. The Norse myth explains how the world began with the death of Ymir. It also explains the differences between ice and fire. This was important to Norse people because they lived in lands that had glaciers and volcanoes. So their myths arose from their surroundings. So if you lived in an area where there was ice and fire, that's what your myths would be about. If you were from a land where everything, where you lived by the water and beautiful oceans and uh, waterways like in the Caribbean, your myths would reflect that. So the geography of where you lived really affected the stories that you told. The Native American myth explains how the world was created when Raven took the stars, the moon, and the sun into the sky. Unlike Ymir, Raven was not killed. He was able to outwit the sky chief and tricked him into letting Raven play with the stars, the moon, and the sun. Those are wonderful playthings. Raven also turned back into his original form. He was a smart being who knew how to get his own way. Raven is an important character in many Native American creation myths. Glaciers, by the way, are huge sheets of slowly moving ice. Volcanoes are structures that contain hot liquid rock that can explode or erupt or flow. I bet some of you have seen those flows if you've been to Hawaii or different parts of the world. In Norse myths, the eagle's flapping wings made the wind. Wow, that's cool. So what is a myth? Well, there's a couple of them. And let's look now at Mufaro's beautiful daughters. Now, this is an illustrated book, but I was lucky enough to just get the PDF file. But if you can find that at your library, maybe you have it. I mean, this is such a popular book, and it still is. Mufaro's Beautiful Daughters by John Steptoe. Well, he did the illustrated book. However, the story is from Africa. He just rewrote it and made it really good. A long time ago, in a certain place in Africa, a small village lay across a river and half a day's journey from a city where a great king lived. A man named Mufaro lived in his village with his 2 daughters, who were called Manyara and Nyasha. Everyone agreed that Manyara and Nyasha were very beautiful. Manyara was almost always in a bad temper. She teased her sister whenever their father's back was turned, and she had been heard to say, "Someday, Nyasha, I will be queen, and you will be a servant in my household." "If that should come to pass," Nyasha responded, "I will be pleased to serve you. But why do you say such things? You are clever and strong and beautiful. Why are you so unhappy?" "Because everyone talks about how kind you are, and they praise everything you do," Manyara replied. "I'm certain that Father loves you best, but when I am queen, everyone will know that your silly kindness is only weakness." Nyasha was sad that Manyara felt this way, but she ignored her sister's words and went about her chores. Nyasha kept a small plot of land on which she grew millet, sunflowers, yams, and vegetables. She always sang as she worked, and some said it was her singing that made her crops more bountiful than anyone else's. One day, Nyasha noticed a small garden snake resting beneath a yam vine. "Good day, little Nyoka," she called to him. "You are welcome here. You will keep away creatures who might spoil my vegetables." She bent forward, gave this little snake a loving pat on the head, and then returned to her work. From that day on, Nyoka was always at Nyasha's side when she tended her garden. It was said that she sang all the more sweetly when he was there. Mufaro knew nothing of how Manyara treated Nyasha, that was the father. Nyasha was too considerate of her father's feelings to complain, and Manyara was always careful to behave herself when Mufaro was around. Maybe you've experienced that with your brothers or sisters or friends. They act one way and then suddenly they act another way. Back and forth. Early one morning, a messenger from the city arrived. The great king wanted a wife. "The most worthy and beautiful daughters in the land are invited to appear before the king, and he will choose one to become queen," the messenger proclaimed. Mufaro called Manyara and Nyasha to him. "It would be a great honor to have one of you chosen. Prepare yourselves to journey to the city. I will call together all our friends to make a wedding party. We will leave tomorrow as the sun rises." "But my father," Manyara said sweetly, "it would be painful for either of us to leave you, even to be wife to the king. I know Nyasha would grieve to death if she were parted from you. I am strong. Send me to the city and let poor Nyasha be happy here with you." Mufaro beamed with pride. The king has asked for the most worthy and the most beautiful. No, Manyara, I cannot send you alone. Only a king can choose between two such worthy daughters. Both of you must go." That night, when everyone was asleep, Manyara stole quietly out of the village. She had never been in the forest at night before, and she was frightened, but her greed to be the first to appear before the king drove her on. In her hurry, she almost stumbled over a small boy who suddenly appeared, standing in the path. "Please," said the boy, "I am hungry. Will you give me something to eat?" "I have brought only enough for myself," Manyara replied. "But please, I am so very hungry." "Out of my way, boy. Tomorrow I will become your queen. How dare you stand in my path?" After traveling for what seemed to be a great distance, Manyara came to a small clearing. There, silhouetted against the moonlight, was an old woman seated on a large stone. The old woman spoke. "I will give you some advice, Manyara. Soon after you pass the place where two paths cross, you will see a grove of trees. They will laugh at you. You must not laugh in return. Later, you will meet a man with his head under his arm. You must be polite to him." "How do you know my name? How dare you advise your future queen? Stand aside, you ugly old woman." Manyara scolded and then rushed on her way without looking back. Just as the old woman had foretold, Manyara came to a grove of trees, and they did indeed seem to be laughing at her. "I must be calm. I will not be frightened." She looked up at the trees and laughed out loud. "I laugh at you, trees," she shouted, and then she hurried on. It was not yet dawn when Manyara heard the sound of rushing water. "The river must be up ahead," she thought. "The great city is just on the other side." But there on the rise, she saw a man with his head in his hand tucked under his arm. Manyara ran past him without speaking. "A queen acknowledges only those who please her," she said to herself. "I will be queen. I will be queen," she chanted as she hurried on towards the city. Nyasha woke at the first light of dawn. As she put on her finest garments, she thought how her life might be changed forever beyond this day. "I'd much prefer to live here," she admitted to herself. "I'd hate to leave this village and never see my father or sing to little Nyoka again." And there we will stop and finish tomorrow. Oh yes, a riveting tale. See you soon.